Hi and welcome guys, this is JNM with the third part of the Blender game asset creation series, and in this one we will UV unwrap the model. I decided to separate the mesh into three objects: the well, the roof and the handle. The handle is already separated, so I just need to switch to edit mode for the well, hover over the lower part and press L to select, then Ctrl I to invert the selection, and then I press Ctrl P to turn the roof into a separate object. And here you can see I can hide or display these objects. And this is great for game assets, because then you could decide for your game if you want the model to be with or without particular parts like the roof or the handle. Okay, now let me show you an add-on that I use for UV unwrapping, or better to say to straighten UV islands. It is called UV squares. You can download it from GitHub for free, or if you want to support CG cookies and get support for the add-on, you can buy it from the Blender market. I added both links to the description below. After we unwrap the mesh, you can see this add-on in action. But now let's continue with the unwrapping process and start with the mesh of the well. I open a new image editor window and create a new image. For the content type of this image, I use a UV grid. The material for the well I already created. It is called matte well. And to use the image for this material, I open a new node editor window, add an image texture, assign the image to it and connect the node to the diffuse shader. Okay, when I select all the faces now in edit mode and do a smart UV project for it, the mesh is UV unwrapped and the image can already be seen after I turn to material viewport shading. But have a look at the UV islands. It's a mess and we will get a lot of seams that we don't want for our model. And this is why we will do the UV unwrapping manually by adding seams to the mesh. I enable edge selection and select the edges and edge loops that I want to turn into seams. After that, I press the button Mark Seam on the tab Shading UVs, and the new seams get a red color. Then I press A to select the whole mesh and then U to unwrap. And here's the result. This looks much more tidy, but we have some UV islands which are bent and not straightened, and this is where the add-on UV squares comes into play. Let me first rearrange some islands by selecting them and then pressing the G key to move them. Then I select one that I want to straighten, and after that I press the T key to display the tools shelf, and there's a tab called Misc which comes from the UV squares add-on. Now the only thing that I have to do is to select the UV island and then press to grid by shape. And the same thing I do for all the UV islands that I want to straighten. This one I rotate 90 degrees, press R and then type in 90. And the same for this one. And look at this, we have nice straightened UVs. To use the full space of our image, I select all the UV islands after I arranged them and press S to scale them up. And after that we can regard the UV unwrapping process of the first object as finished. Alright, now let's UV unwrap the roof and the wood beams. It's a bit more complicated, but I will show you some nice tricks here. I will start with the same steps that we used for the well mesh. I create a new material, I do smart UV project, I used the same image with the UV grid in my new material just to see that smart UV project leads to a mess and we have to mark the seams manually. So let's start here with the roof, again in edge selection mode, and mark the seams. Okay, the seams are marked, then I select this part of the model by hovering over it and pressing the L key, and then I press U to UV unwrap this part. I again use my UV squares add-on then to straighten the islands and to check if the UV unwrapping for this part of the mesh works as expected. Now let's UV unwrap this beam. It's a bit hard to add the seams because we can't fully see this part. But there's a nice selection trick. Press L to select the beam, then Ctrl I to inverse the selection, and then press H to hide. I also switch to object mode and hide the other objects. And then the beam is fully visible and I can comfortably add the seams. Alright, the beam is unwrapped, but I have two of them and I don't want to redo the whole UV unwrapping process. And to avoid this, I copy the UV islands by pressing U, copy UVs for this UV map. After that, I select the other beam and paste the UVs that I just copied. And this is very cool and saves a lot of time, but it's not a Blender default feature. The add-on that brings this functionality is called Magic UV. The link can also be found in the description below. Alright guys, for the other parts I will use the same techniques, it's just an analogy, so I will speed up the video here. Okay, this was the last object that we unwrapped. Now I choose Pack UV with a margin of 0.06 and the well is fully unwrapped and ready to be textured. So I hope you find this tutorial useful. UV unwrapping is a complicated process, but I'm sure you will get used to it. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. The next part of this series will follow soon. Thanks a lot for watching this and thanks for your support. See you soon on JNM.